Let me tell you about one of the most bizarre, just head-scratching stories from all of World War II. It's about a guy named General Terry Allen, a brilliant, absolutely ferocious commander who leads his men to victory after victory, only to get fired, right at the absolute peak of his success.
Okay, just look at this timeline. It makes no sense. On August 7th, 1943, General Omar Bradley fires Terry Allen, sacks him, sends him packing. His career is, for all intents and purposes, over. But then, literally 2 days later, on August 9th, this issue of Time magazine shows up on newsstands all across America. And who's on the cover? Terry Allen, celebrated as one of the Army's absolute best combat leaders.
So you gotta ask, how on earth does that happen? How is America's newest, biggest war hero suddenly out of a job? Well, to get that, you really have to understand the man himself.
Terry Allen was, to put it mildly, not your typical spit and polish officer. He was a maverick from the word go.
You know, he came from this big military family, but he was just wired differently. He had severe dyslexia, which made school an absolute nightmare. In fact, he failed out of West Point twice. But instead of quitting, he found a back door into the Army through ROTC. And in World War I, oh man, he became a legend. This is a guy who'd personally lead patrols, got shot straight through the jaw by a machine gun, and then showed back up at the front while he was still bleeding. He was brilliant, totally fearless, but he thought all the regulations and military ceremony were a complete waste of time.
But one very important person saw right through Allen's rough exterior, the Army Chief of Staff himself, George C. Marshall. While other generals saw a troublemaker, Marshall saw a natural-born leader who could win. He's the one who personally promoted Allen because he knew that the war that was coming would be won by fighters, not by guys who just followed the book.
And that exact fighting spirit would soon put Allen on a direct collision course with his new boss over in North Africa, a general named Omar Bradley.
I mean, you could not find two more different human beings. For Terry Allen, the only thing that mattered was winning on the battlefield, period. He was aggressive, he was unconventional, and his men would have followed him straight into hell. Omar Bradley, on the other hand, he was the ultimate manager. A by-the-book West Point guy who truly believed that a perfectly saluted officer and a clean uniform were the bedrock of a winning army. So when Bradley saw Allen's scruffy, brawling but effective soldiers, he was absolutely appalled.
But here's the kicker. During the invasion of Sicily, a massive German tank counterattack comes roaring down on the beaches, threatening to push the entire American landing force right back into the sea. And the only thing that stopped them? Terry Allen's division. Even Bradley, the guy who couldn't stand Allen, later admitted that Allen's unit might have been the only one on that beach capable of saving the entire invasion.
But that incredible victory, it wasn't enough to save Allen. In fact, his greatest success would lead directly to his fall from grace.
So after stopping the tanks on the beach, Allen just relentlessly pushes his men inland. He drives them until, after 6 days of just savage fighting, they capture the key German stronghold of Troina. It was a huge, monumental victory that basically broke the back of the German defense in Sicily. And then, the very next day, August 7th, Bradley calls Allen into his headquarters and fires him. The official reason? Not incompetence, not failure. The reason was, and I quote, for being too much of an individualist. Think about that. Bradley had just fired one of his best combat commanders because his soldiers didn't salute properly.
The decision was, as you can imagine, hugely controversial. General George Patton, who, by the way, was no friend of Allen's, was furious. When he heard Army Command criticizing Allen's division for its lack of discipline, Patton publicly interrupted General Eisenhower himself, shouting, "No one whips a dog before putting him into a fight." But it was too late. Allen was sent home in disgrace.
So Allen thought his career was over. But what he didn't know was that back in Washington, his biggest supporter, George Marshall, was watching everything. And Marshall was about to make a huge bet.
Just 2 months. That's it. That's how long Terry Allen was unemployed. 2 months after Omar Bradley declared him totally unfit for command, George Marshall gave him a brand new division to lead, the 104th, nicknamed the Timberwolves.
The message from the Army Chief of Staff could not have been more clear. Marshall didn't care about Bradley's complaints about spit and polish. He didn't need a polite general who followed procedure. He needed a brawler who knew how to win wars. And he was betting the farm that Terry Allen was that man.
And Allen took this incredible second chance and used it to forge one of the most unique and deadly fighting forces of the entire war.
He took a division of green draftees and basically turned them into his own personal instrument of revenge. He knew that night attacks were the great equalizer. So while a standard division might train, say, 8 hours a week at night, Allen's Timberwolves trained for 35. They learned to move, to attack, and to win in total complete darkness, all while living by their new motto, nothing in hell must stop the Timberwolves.
And when they hit Europe, my God, they were just unstoppable. In October of '44, they sliced through the supposedly unbreakable Siegfried line with a series of brutal night attacks. By March '45, they'd smashed across rivers and captured the city of Cologne. They pushed all the way across Germany until, in late April, they finally linked up with the Soviets. German prisoners just called them the Night Fighters and said fighting them was unfair because you never, ever saw them come.
For months, the Timberwolves had owned the night. They used darkness as a weapon. But on April 11, 1945, they found a different kind of darkness, one that would haunt them for the rest of their lives.
They stumbled upon the Nordhausen concentration camp. Inside, they found 3,000 corpses just lying in the open and hundreds of emaciated survivors. I mean, these men were masters of the battlefield, but nothing could have prepared them for the industrial scale of extermination they witnessed that day.
By the time the war ended, Allen's vindication was complete. The Timberwolves fought for 195 days straight. They never gave up a single inch of ground, and they never once failed to take an objective. The Germans themselves rated them as one of the divisions they feared the most. It was an absolutely incredible record, but it came at a terrible cost, with nearly 5,000 of his men becoming casualties.
So when you boil it all down, you're left with two very different legacies. You have General Bradley, the manager, who valued procedures so much that he fired one of his best fighters in the middle of a war. And then you have Terry Allen, the maverick, who ignored the rules but built not one, but two of the most successful American divisions of the entire war.
Which really just leaves us with one final thought. What truly makes a great leader when everything is on the line? Is it the general who builds perfectly disciplined soldiers? Or is it the one who just wins?